Excited to talk to you. We'll be getting into Sentry, your creation that we've been seeing in Thunderbolts / new Avengers movie. But here at Bionic Buzz, we're all about people's passion. I want to know where your passion to be a writer kind of came from. Was it a certain comic book issue or something that was just natural for you as a child?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. Thanks for starting off with a really good one. Because I'm not like a lot of other people. I sort of marched a beat of my own drum, and I had a very unusual childhood, I'd have to say. I'm lucky enough right now to be writing a big introduction to one of my first big comic works, which is Hellblazer. And a lot of what I get to write about is like, why am I a writer? Where did I come from? Yeah. Mm-hmm. I grew up in the countryside. My dad left when I was 5, and I was a little boy living on a farm. We had no electricity most of the time. We moved around every other 5 minutes. My mum is an incredibly unique and interesting genius level person. And so you grow up in that environment, and I think you will either sink or swim, right? Mm-hmm. But I didn't see that environment ever as being difficult. It didn't really matter about deprivation. I would walk to school in the morning because we couldn't afford bus fare. And so other people would say, well, it was probably difficult to walk 1.5 miles. And my brother and I would say, no, we saw foxes and stoats and weasels, and we ran around, and we always showed up, and we went rain or shine. All of the amazing experiences we had living as feral kids, on a farm or wherever it was that we had moved to, all of that stuff, the darkness of the forest, the orchards at midnight and the snow, that stuff shaped me. And so I was always going to be a writer. I just didn't know until I found myself all the way through Ninja Turtles, and I tried out to be a writer and became one.
Yeah, well, you kind of started as an editor for a long time, and then, correct me if I misread this on the internet, but your first pitch to be a writer was, you mentioned Hellblazer. You met someone at San Diego Comic-Con? I guess. Yeah. Because I think it's very inspiring to other people,
It should be. I was lucky enough, right, when I was an editor, that one of the people I had edited was Alan Moore, who created V for Vendetta and Swamp Thing and all this stuff, right? And I was the editor-in-chief of a very short-lived comic book company in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I'd gone over to Great Britain to talk to Alan and say, and I'd caught up with him, and I used to be the editor of his unfinished magnum opus. It was called Big Numbers. And I was kind of chatting with him, and he was talking to me about some chart that he'd made that showed the way that the characters would work through the story. And I said, Alan, I see this amazing work of yours, and I don't see that in other comics. But I will say that I think like that. What do you think? Should I give it a shot? And he said, why not? Which is very Alan. And so I went to San Diego, and I had no sense of self-awareness. And I went to Lou Stathis, who was the editor of Hellblazer for Vertigo. I think it's probably one of the more prestigious comics that professionals want to do. And I asked him, well, can I try out for the book? And he said, what have you written? And the fact is I couldn't even type. I didn't know how to type. And I said, nothing but, And he let me try out, and to his credit and the credit of Karen Berger, the editor-in-chief at Vertigo, they gave me the gig 6 weeks later. Wow. You cannot break in like that, but I did, which means that you can break in like that.
Well, it's inspiring. I hope someone watching this might say and be like, maybe I should go for it and try that. You never know.
Yeah. If someone tells you can't do it, you know what that means? It means they can't do it. They're just telling you what they can't do.
Gotcha. Well, let's dive into Sentry. I guess it was created in 2000, but I guess you've been pitching that for a while before then. Is that correct?
Yes, indeed. In fact, he was created, now it's May of 2025. He was created in May of 1995.
Oh, okay. Tell me the backstory and inspiration for him,
I had just started working on Hellblazer. I'd been working on it for a while. I thought that I could do more because, Hellblazer is normally a horror title, and I wasn't really a horror guy. It's probably the least of what I like to do, Mm-hmm. And so I'd come back to Karen Berger at Vertigo, the next San Diego, and I'd said, look, I'd really like to do more. I found this character called Hourman at DC. So Hourman takes a pill, and it lasts for 1 hour, and then he can't take another one for 23 hours. And I said, oh, wow, you could do a story about addiction. Like, that would be the most addictive substance in the world. Karen said, it's a pretty good idea, but Vertigo doesn't really do anything like that. We just don't do superheroes. I think you should create a new character. And so from that, I wanted to create a character that, the idea of Sentry, basically, he was an addict, but he had mental health issues. And so I wrote the whole thing out. It was a very, very precise document. It had all the stuff about the heroes and like being a missing hero and all that kind of stuff. And I laid it out for DC and then pitched it back to an editor called Kerry Kowalski, and Kerry loved it and could go nowhere with it. So I pitched it to Marvel and they said no, and I pitched it to DC again and they said no, and Marvel said no. Then I won an Eisner about 4 or 5 years later with Jae Lee, and so I repitched it and asked if Jae and I could do it. And the reason everyone has the Sentry is because Jae said, I love this and I would like to do this. And even though we could have kind of written our own ticket at that point, we did the Sentry, and that's what gave birth to it.
That's amazing. So, I mean, you kept up that passion for 5 years up to that point to get
because I knew it was great.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I mean, did you get to work at all with the Thunderbolts movie or come on set? I know you're in Atlanta, so...
Yeah, I got to work with Jake Schreier and a couple of the creative producers. I got to tell them a lot about what I felt was in the character, right? Mm-hmm. One thing that's incredibly gratifying to me, and we have to kind of go to the right place here, right? That film is there because Jake. Yeah. Right? Jake Schreier made a great film, and he knew how to do that, right? That character is there because of what Lewis has done and what Florence Pugh has done, right? Like, those people made that stuff real.
Absolutely.
But for my small part of it, I was able to talk to Jake and really go through it with him. And Jake and I actually met up at the after party, which is really cool, because I kind of walked in thinking, well, you know, I don't know who's around. And Jake called me over and like, Paul, I really wanted to know, like, what did you think of the film? Why that's kind of cool is, I think Jake was so much more into the creative of it than he was into, you know, the adulation or the attention or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And so we talked it through, and it was clear that Jake really cared about my opinion because of the conversations that we'd had. He really brought a lot of what I had discussed with him into the way that he thought about his film. And then I got to meet Lewis, right? And Lewis was like really nice to me and just like, man, I love your character. I'm so grateful to be doing him, and I feel like I'm on this great ride. So I think the filmmakers really cared about the characters, and it shows in the film.
Oh, absolutely. It's funny because I saw it Thursday night, opening weekend, and I was telling everyone, like, it's like Avengers levels good. And then, of course, they ended up changing the title to it.
Oh, they got the second Avengers then. It was a second
Avengers. Exactly. Well, cool. I want to dive into Meta Studios. That's your own production company. That's really amazing. You can tell us the backstory with that and what you've been working on?
Yeah. So one of the things that people don't realize about me, and I'm going to give you a phrase from an old golfer in a minute to explain all of this, right? So beware, I'm about to use a golf metaphor. What people don't realize about me, I think every time that someone says that's a comic guy, I always kind of grate a little bit because it's the least of what I do, or it's certainly a part of what I do. When I did comics in the mainstream, I was never really an insider. I didn't study to be a comic book writer. I studied to be a filmmaker, actually. And so, around about 2013, I was speaking downtown in Atlanta. We were talking about the advent of the tax credits and what they were doing for Georgia. And at the time, the governor was a great guy called Nathan Deal. Mm-hmm. You couldn't have asked me, because I'm an old punk, right, so I don't do politics. I couldn't have told you if he was Republican or Democrat. But this being Georgia, I probably could have guessed he was Republican, right? Yeah. And there was someone from LA who was quite arrogant, talking about why we needed to send our young people to LA to have their, I'm quoting here, to have their hearts broken and their dreams crushed. And if they're still standing after 5 years, she would consider them realistically employable. Oh. I'm on a panel and I'm like, listen, I'm an immigrant to the state and an immigrant to the country, but I went off on her, right? I was like, don't you come to my state and tell me what we've got to do to ruin our young people. You're where films go to die, right? Just like yelling at the state. And the governor's daughter was in the audience, and she said, I think my dad would love to hear from you. So I ended up chairing an advisory committee on digital interactive, which is game design, which I've been part of, and independent filmmaking informally. Our job was to examine the tax credits and make sure that they meant something to the state of Georgia. It's kind of interesting because obviously at that point I've actually helped Marvel in some very direct ways beyond some of the stuff I've made, because we made sure that the tax credits were sustained and they were examined properly, so that's definitely saved Marvel a lot of money. Yeah. But Meta Studios was born, and it really speaks to the love that I have for the things that I do. It's an acronym. We beat Zuckerberg by 50 years. I was gonna say. Yeah. So it means media, education, technology, and advancement. Media is what I do. I've done it for 30 plus years. Education is what I care about because I love to educate people. Technology is, I think, what sets my company apart because we understand new technologies, and that's currently what we're working on, a lot of really cool new technologies. And advancement is kind of about the advancement of creatives. So we have a bunch of stuff that we're doing right now. We are working with a company called Yotonyo Studios. It's kind of a weird name, but Yotonyo are developing new technologies. And so along with their founder, a guy called Peter Wax, who was the guy that brought he brought a TCG card game of Cyberpunk to reality. Oh, cool. We're developing out some new technologies, and then Meta Studios' job is to build out those new technologies into like a storytelling to do the proof of concept of these technologies. So people look at me and they go, hang on a minute, don't you do comics? And how did you get so lucky as to be involved in, say, a new technology of this kind or that kind? Why are you doing that? Which is where the golf metaphor comes in, or at least the quote. The old golfer Gary Player said, the more I practice, the luckier I become. And so I work very hard at what I do, and Meta Studios is building out. We've got someone over in Cannes right now trying to kind of get some funding in for our film projects. We are working on new technologies. We have a game design project that we're working on. So we do across the board, which suits me just fine. Yeah.
You do have a pretty good video background. I mean, you worked on God of War and many other titles too, so.
Yeah, my favorite title I ever worked on is The Darkness, and if anybody's ever played it, it's my favorite game because I think we did things in that game that have been emulated by so many games since.
Oh yeah, I'm unfamiliar with it. Can you be on it?
I came over to Starbreeze in Sweden, and I had just written Darkness for Top Cow, and so I basically had the most incredible opportunity because I was my own approval. Approval, and they sent me over and said, man, you kind of helped rebuild the franchise in the comics. Whatever you want to do, you can get approved. And we were just lucky enough to have a great producer, and we got transferred to 2K in the middle of production of the game. And so we made, I think, a real immersive love story in the form of a mobster with demon tentacles on his back. And we really did. And I think it's a meaningful game that has been emulated by so many games since.
Oh, okay. Cool. I'll have to check that out then. So before I let you go, is there anything else in the works you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's almost impossible to say what I need a shout out for, right?
I know, you're a very busy guy.
I'm heading over to London in a couple of days, I think, because we're going to, I kid you not, like a cryptocurrency conference. But I'll tell you what, I will say this. I feel like I'm sometimes the champion of the bastard child of literature, right? I've worked in comics, I've worked in video games, and a lot of times people say, well, comics, how could they be literate? And they are. Video games, how could they be? Well, have you played Assassin's Creed? It's beautiful at times, right? Last of Us, yeah?
Absolutely.
So one of the things that I think has been given a hugely bad rap, and is very well deserved, by the way, for some reasons, which is like NFTs and blockchain technology lately, right? Mm-hmm. But blaming NFTs is a little bit like if someone attacks you with a hammer and you blame the hammer, right? Because NFTs are fundamentally useful technology that actually get used by massive corporations already. Blockchain technology in Web3 is really useful. It's crypto bros that are ripping you off. Right, you should be upset with the crypto bro kind of culture that, like, basically was a pump and dump scheme, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's worth saying that, a lot of the work I do in new technologies where people sort of look at it and they say, I don't trust that anymore, or that AI is a ripoff. And I say, let me tell you, AI, just like any other tool, is a glorified hammer. It's what we do to exploit AI that you should be upset with. If people are stealing other people's work, you shouldn't like it, but that doesn't mean to say that AI is bad. It means that the thieves are bad, yeah? So I think, a lot of what I want to do is to kind of evangelize for these ways of telling stories and these new technologies, because they're going to mean something anyway, whether you like it or not.
Mm-hmm. Well, cool. Thank you so much for taking your time to talk to me. And I think it's very inspiring, your whole backstory and what you're doing in the future. It's going to be amazing, too.
Thanks, dude.